Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me? Everybody can hear me? Okay, you're going to have to bear with me because this is the first time I've ever done a presentation where people wear headsets. So this is new for me, but you can hear me. That's good. Awesome. Great. All right, well, thank you very much for coming this afternoon. I really do appreciate you taking some time out of the expo hall and some of the other conference centers to come and listen to a presentation about our latest NPD research on the Canadian gamer. So my name is Jason Hilchey, and I'm the president and CEO of the Entertainment Software Association of Canada. And we are the association that represents video game developers, publishers, and distributors across Canada. We have members from St. John's, Newfoundland, all the way to Victoria, British Columbia, and all points in between. You can get an idea of the types of companies that we represent here. Most of the larger employers in the Canadian industry are our members, along with a number of small independent and medium-sized independent studios as well. So I'm going to start with just a quick overview of some of the data that I presented last year with respect to the Nordicity study. Christian is here from Nordicity to take this in, but the Canadian video game industry, I think, as you know, is very vibrant. It's a global leader in the production and development of video games. We've got almost 600 studios in Canada, employing close to 22,000 full-time workers, generating close to $4 billion a year. I'll give you a little bit of context in that. I was in Australia in March, working with my counterpart there about trying to talk to the Australian government about providing tax incentives to the video game industry. And with Canada having about 36 million people in our population, Australia having about 25 million, very similar Commonwealth-style countries. They have 965 employees in their entire national industry, 965. And we have probably over 22,000 now. These are a year old. But the average salary, as you can see, is over $77,000 a year. Governments love this. And again, it's one of the reasons why I was in Australia helping out my friend Ron with pitching to the Australian government about why they should be supporting the video game industry. So this is just a quick overview of what the industry side of it is. I'm not going to be talking about this today. We're going to be talking about what the Canadian gamer looks like. But I just wanted to start off with, we are a world leader in the development and production of video games. So just to give you an overview of what this research entails, we partnered with NPD, which most of you would know as the main research firm that does video game sales and trend data. We've worked with them for a number of years, and they do a fantastic job with us, specifically around this study. We say here that we surveyed 2,579 adults and about another little over 500 kids. But those are the gamers. So we actually surveyed about 4,200 Canadians about whether or not they were gamers and whether or not they played on a regular basis, and if they did, what their gaming habits are. So just give you an idea. We interviewed them across the country. The surveys were done in both English and French. We have data that we can break out for the Quebec population if you are interested. To give you an advance bit of information, it is very similar to the overall demographic. Quebec video game players are just the same as they are in Vancouver or Toronto, but we do have that. And of course, males and females. So, it was a broad, like a political voting intention survey. Very similar to that, except it was long and involved a lot of questions. So, the most important thing that I want to leave you with today is that this first slide, that Canada is a nation of gamers. Everyone plays games, not just your little brother. And what is stunning is that per capita, Canada has more video game players than anywhere else in the world. 64% of Canadians are gamers. Okay, so over 23 million of us play video games or have played a video game in the last 4 weeks, which is the way that we define gamer. And again, we are one of the top nations in the world per capita. Now, video game players come from every walk of life, every demographic, and are played by males and females of all ages. The average player in 2018 is now 39 years old and could be a male or a female, as it is now evenly split 50-50 for the first time. As you can see, the average age is 39. The average person is playing about 10 hours a week. And public reception of video games is strong, with 80% of Canadians seeing video games as mainstream entertainment, something that's not always covered by the media. In fact, I just did a media interview with CTV News here that's going to air on CTV Montreal tonight at 5. And one of the questions that came up was about the video games being a niche industry and about how it's played by, people alone in their basements, and that's simply just not the case. And in fact, that narrative is something that was a driving factor in us building this study so that we could debunk it. So 40% of Canadians like to use their spare time to play video games. 30% believe video games are the best form of entertainment. And when it comes to how video games are making a positive impact in society, 51% of Canadians believe games help people learn how to solve problems and learn technical skills. And you can see how other industries are using video games or video game technology to train employees and do everything from teaching them how to do surgery on medical devices. Well, this survey doesn't really cover serious gaming, but I'm happy to take questions afterwards. Okay. So they're doing everything from training medical devices on how to conduct surgery to teaching maintenance technicians how to build and maintain airplanes. But one thing that's important, that's really important to showcase, are how games are social, how they build community, help people deal with life issues, and in some cases, get them through very difficult times. So I'm very happy to announce that we have partnered with a new nonprofit called Do a Barrel Roll. This new organization is all about showcasing how games have been used for good, and not just on the innovation side of things, but more on the social and societal side of things. And as only one part of our overall strategic approach to ensuring that the public and the media see the positive side of games and our stories, we've been sharing numerous stories from people who have shared them with Do a Barrel Roll. And here are just a few. As you can see, gaming isn't just about entertainment. We use it for a sense of community, to augment our long-distance friendship, and to fill the void in between visits. It's more than just gaming, it's bonding. And this one, contrary to popular belief, video games have always been more than just a solo experience in a dimly lit room, locked away from the world. They are so much more than that. They're about connection, communication, and of course, entertainment. And that's one of the messages that we've been really trying to get across, that video games are very social. They aren't something that are played in isolation. And I'm really, really happy that in our Toronto launch event, we had Ben Obright, who's the founder of Do a Barrel Roll, attend with us and say a few words. And this is only a very nascent partnership that we've built with Do a Barrel Roll. I'm really excited for us as we go forward to be able to work with them more closely and be able to share some of the stories about how video games are positively impacting people in their everyday lives. And it's important that we ensure that we get that narrative out that video games are social. Many of the media articles I've read in the past year paint a different picture of our industry, one that encourages isolation and loneliness, and this couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, most video game players play with friends, and 71% of parents who play games also play with their kids at least once a week. And it's this type of research, these stats and facts, that our industry needs to ensure is out in the public realm. And that's why we're sharing this across the country. As I said, we launched in Toronto on October 29th. We're here in Montreal today. We're in Halifax tomorrow, and then on the 26th of November, we're launching it with industry and media in Vancouver. And we've had amazing and positive media coverage in both French and English markets, especially right here in Quebec. You can see that we're getting the headlines that we want. Canada's video game players are just like anyone else. You know, les Canadiens champions de jeux vidéo. We are the champions of video games. We have more video game players in Canada than anywhere else in the world. But in addition to that, you know, right here in Quebec, we have the biggest industry in Canada and one of the biggest industries in the world. And this is just a selection of some of the media that we got, but it's definitely shifting the narrative and telling the story that we want to put out there, which is that video games are a positive force in society. And our players are average people who like to participate in numerous activities. They like games for sure, but they like to diversify their entertainment time. Canadian video game players like to watch Netflix, go to the movies, go to the gym, for a walk, and some like to coach sports teams and play in bands. They're just you and I. So, to recap, the profile of a Canadian video game player I'll reiterate a few key findings. Gamers are spread out across all demographic groups. They like to play with friends and family and use games as a way to socialize. They don't just play games, but they engage in a variety of activities, both indoors and outdoors. And they like to play a variety of games, not limiting themselves to one genre. So now that you know who the Canadian video game player is, let's find out how they're accessing our content. This slide shows you the overlap for the last 3 studies that we have done with NPD and gives you a clear indication of the trends among gamers within the last 4 weeks prior to taking our questionnaire. What was only a nascent little industry in 2012 is now the #1 way players access our content, and that is mobile. It has continued to grow since 2012, and while growth from 2016 to 2018 is small, it still continues to outpace all other platforms. And you can see that in 2012, we only had 20% of people accessing video games on mobile devices, and now we're up over 70%. And it's something that is really interesting because, as I explained, it was almost a bit of a dichotomy with mobile gaming because for those of you who were at my presentation last year when we were talking about how mobile games were suffering with respect to the development process, we were in a bit of a like I said, it's the only word I can think of is a dichotomy with respect to mobile games are still the #1 way people access games, but they have decreased more than any other form of development in Canada over the last 2 years. What was the #1 form of development has now dropped. I think it was about 25%. And that's because as we traveled the country last year, we were finding that mobile game developers were having a hard time being discovered. And so discoverability is something that we talk about a lot when we're meeting with government or we're meeting with CMF or we're meeting with other organizations to find ways for games to be discovered. The other issue that they have, of course, you know, that's related to discoverability is monetization, finding ways to profit. I think most of you who are in the mobile game space know that, you know, most of the mobile revenue is going to, you know, an aggregate of, you know, the top 40 games in the various app stores. And even at that, once you get down to 40, it's not that much. And when you take into consideration that there are thousands of games being created all the time, you're starting to get a picture that there is a challenge. But yet, mobile game playing is still the #1 way that our players access our content. So it's an interesting contrast. Whereas we've got a lot of people that still want to access games on mobile, and that's because we have more people owning mobile phones than any other platform in this country. But we still yet have a problem with monetizing mobile games. And it's something that, you know, is a good icebreaker if you ever wanted to have that discussion with somebody. Now, while the previous slide shows how people have accessed our content, this slide shows which platforms they play on the most. And again, mobile comes out on top. So again, more people are playing games on mobile, and most importantly, more people are playing games most often on mobile. And this data also continues to climb over the last 2 years. So again, not only are they playing more on mobile, but they're playing most often. So again, you would think that there would be a direct correlation between the most profitable games and those that people are playing with most often, but we're seeing that that's simply not the case. It is in a small number of games at the very top of the charts, but not for most developers. And one of the main reasons for this is the obvious factor, which is mobile device penetration, just within mainstream society. As I said, 94% of Canadians own a mobile device. Everyone who has a phone has a game platform in their hand. And 94% of us own a mobile device. You can get a sense of some of the other statistics with respect to mobile. I'm going to go through all the platforms, so starting with mobile because it is the most played. So, and the same goes for PC. With 89% of Canadians owning a PC, the penetration and consumer potential for PC games is extremely high. And our study shows that PC games are present the second most used form of games within the last 4 weeks. But PC games are third on the list with respect to how often players engage in them, with only 24% of gamers reporting they play most often on PC. So a little bit different, even though almost everybody has a PC in their house. They're not engaging with the games on the PC the same way that they're engaging with the games on their mobile device. Only a small fraction of people own a mobile device more so than they own a PC, yet they're engaging with that mobile device on an almost daily basis. Okay. Yeah, a lot of them can play. Maybe not the most aggressive ones, but Facebook games and social games and things like that. My dad, for instance, plays mobile games all the time, but he also plays PC games, and he just turned 65, but he's a big Mobile Strike fan on mobile. So, but yeah, it's a good point. So that's because 26% of gamers play most often on consoles, even though the penetration of consoles in Canadian homes is at 60% versus the 89% for PC. So you've got 26% of people engaging with our products on consoles when only 60% of Canadians own one versus PC. Now, clearly, people who buy consoles enjoy playing most on consoles, and I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone, because if you're buying, as the lady just said, buying a PC, it may not be for gaming, but if you're buying a console, it's certainly not to, do anything but games. So some of these data points are more obvious, than others. So one platform that has shown a clear decline over the last number of years in the face of the rise of mobile is dedicated handheld. Even though sales of dedicated handhelds have been strong over the years, only 29% of gamers report owning one. And those who do own one are not really playing it as much as they used to, with only 18% of gamers having used it once in the last 4 weeks, and only 3% reporting that they play most often on dedicated handheld. Now, a platform that has had, a big surprise on some of the research that we did, and it's clearly in its early days, is VR. One thing that we were really surprised to see is that 8% of Canadians already own a VR headset, and 5% of them are playing on it in the last 4 weeks. Now, as you can expect, only a fraction of people are playing on VR most often. But again, we're in early days of VR, and I think that as we go through the process of having more differentiation with products, but also with having consumer prices come down, having a higher penetration rate, we're going to see that go up. But again, VR is not for everybody, and again, it's just one new way that we have for people to access our content, just like all of the other platforms that we operate on. Now, as an industry, we take our commitment to parents very seriously. It's our responsibility as an industry to regulate ourselves, or someone else is going to do it. And we have been very successful with doing it ourselves using the ESRB ratings. Every province in Canada uses the ESRB as the legal rating authority for video games. But we have to continuously show that we are doing a good job. And I think by the statistics that you see on this slide, you'll agree that we are. And as an industry, we are doing a great job. But there are always threats around the corner, whether it be the WHO and its controversial gaming disorder classification, countries banning in-game transactions and random items, or media blaming our industry for the latest violent act. Now more than ever, we need to show how strong we are with ensuring that only appropriate content ends up in the hands of those who play it. And as you've seen through this presentation, everyone is playing our games, not just kids, but adults and even older adults at that. And with 80% of Canadians agreeing that video games are mainstream entertainment, our industry has come a long way. The opportunities that lie ahead for us are numerous, but they are not guaranteed. So as I wrap up, and I will take all the questions that you have, I'll ask you this. To talk about the good that our industry does, to speak up when you hear simplifications and stereotypes that no longer exist. And if your studio is not already a member of some sort of trade association, whether it be Alliance Numérique, or whether you as an individual are a member of the IGDA, or whether it's us that's advocating on behalf of your industry, seriously consider finding a way to support the efforts that are currently being undertaken. Because as an industry, we have to show, that we are a force for good, and I truly believe that we are. And with the fact that almost 90%, 93% of parents see our ratings as something that they use, 80% of them are aware of them, and 80% of them use them when they make a purchase decision, I'm very confident that we're way ahead of so many other industries when it comes to the respect that our self-regulatory system has. But again, it requires all of us to continue to work on that. So at that, my presentation itself was reasonably short, but I'm happy to take all the questions, and we can go back through some of the data points if you like. So. Okay. I'm still trying to figure out how do I get that question. I don't have a headset. Okay. Hi. Yeah, so already online is our Essential Facts booklet. So if you haven't seen it, it's actually right next to you. So in the audience, we've kind of randomly scattered Essential Facts booklets, some in French, some are in English, but we have them in both, and it's essentially the PowerPoint presentation, but with even more information about the data points. I really kind of took out a lot of the maybe more mundane information that's in this and really kind of focused on what was important for today, but this will give you all sorts of ideas about the data points. And if you want more, you can simply just send me an email, and I can provide you some, if we have the data points. So. Yes, sorry, you had a question earlier, so. I can't hear the. Okay.
Have you done any more in-depth studies surrounding serious gaming, or have you thought about having a closer relationship with the government or the community for that, especially with us trying to more simulation gaming or teaching life skills and things like that?
Okay. Are you with a serious gaming company?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay, so the question was, as an industry, have we had collaboration and discussions with serious game companies, with the government with respect to the various aspects of that? I will say that last October, we did a conference in Ottawa called Beyond Entertainment. That was a one-day curated conference that our organization ran, where we brought in I'm trying to think, close to 20 different companies, both from the video game industry, but also from outside the video game industry, who were using video game technology to do, whether it be VR, surgical trainers for VR. In fact, I think Gentronics is around the corner, but Montreal-based Gentronics was one of the highlights of the day. They have an FDA-approved Kinect medical device that allows people who are doing rehab, specifically, I think, especially from strokes, to be able to kind of motivate themselves to be able to do the monotonous rehabilitation exercises that they have. And Mark Evan, who's the CEO of that company, presented at that event, and I mean, he was just fantastic. But we are heavily involved. In fact, my staff and I were just talking today about what we do next year for our study, and we're heavily involved with not so much from an association standpoint, but from an industry standpoint of showcasing how our industry is driving innovations in other sectors. And yes, we had Minister Navdeep Bains was the guest speaker, who's the Minister of Innovation and Economic Development. We took Minister Bains around the room, and he tried out Gintronics. He tried out a number of other things. NVIDIA was there with an AI robot that's being trained through VR. So I mean, it's just a lot of really interesting things. But yes, I can say that we're well down that road. Awesome. I'm part of the club now. Okay. Yeah.
Do you have any? Oh, do you have any data concerning the Nintendo Switch and how it's being used, like as a portable console or as a home console? Because what would be really interesting to see is like what potential core gamers want to play on the go with, like, you know, a core experience.
This is a really good question, and I think that when we started the definition of what is a console, we really had to go back to Nintendo and make sure that, you know, they were in the classification that they wanted to be in. And yeah, the Switch falls, at least in our research, underneath the console. It doesn't fall within the handheld. I mean, Nintendo, it's very much a console, and so it would be part of that 60% penetration rate with respect to ownership of consoles.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. I've got lots of time for more questions, so. Deirdre, did you have a question? No? Okay.
I was just wondering, from some of those numbers seems a bit odd, or maybe, I don't know, inflated or something. It's really nice to see that the industry is actually getting more recognition and all that. But like, just an example, I think in your slides you said that 8% of the VR headset, for example, are Canadian owners. And just statistics from Oculus and HTC and all those platforms account for about 7 million units shipped, and 8% of Canadians is something like 3 million people. So that seems like that Canadians are actually owners of like 40% of VR device.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, with respect to all the VR out there, I don't know what the numbers are, but again, this study was done by a third-party independent organization that specifically specializes in, you know, public opinion research and data points like this. And I mean, while we did go back to them on a few data points saying that, you know, this can't be right, these are the numbers that they came back with. So.
Just a quick follow-up to that great question. What is considered VR? Is it just Oculus Rift, HTC Vive, or are we also talking about Google Daydream, Samsung, like the Gear VR as well? Like,
all of those.
Okay, so
yeah.
it's basically
PlayStation
mobile
VR, everything.
Okay, so that probably adds to your question then.
VR is like accounts all of those. So it's not just VR statistics. I mean, it's other statistics, like the fact that maybe like 60% of gamers are actually playing instruments or something like that. I don't know, it just seems weird. So like 90% of people are actually in good health, like in good shape. If I check, because I checked the research before coming here, and like 90% of gamers are actually healthy, but the Canadian health statistic or whatever it's called, like it was something like 25% or 30% of people were actually like in good health. So it like doesn't match. Or
well, I don't think we did a medical study about, you know, whether or not people are in good health or not. We just wanted to find out whether or not gamers like to do other things to combat the narrative and stereotype that basically gamers are sedentary individuals who sit in their basement. I mean, I didn't put a Fitbit on them and try to figure out, you know, whether or not they did 12,000 steps in a day. But
so my follow-up question is there like any statistic of what actually those number means? Because like if 91% of people actually work out, like your slide suggests, what is a workout? Is like Is that just like walking to work or whatever?
I haven't seen the question about what the actual definition is because NPD had drop-down lists, right? So they would actually ask the question and then they would provide examples of what that actually would be for every question. So I don't know exactly. I mean, what that would entail, but I do believe that the question was designed to find out whether or not you actually went out and did something like So it could involve a walk. I mean, a walk involves working out. I'd be happy if 90% of gamers went for a walk every day.
Yeah, that would be great.
Thanks for taking an interest, though, and thanks for going online and checking it out, though, before you came to the session. No, I like good questions, so it's good.
Hello. I'm an American, so I apologize for that up front. So I was curious that here in Canada, because you had mentioned the WHO classification of gaming as a disorder, and the sort of the prejudices.
Well, I didn't call it a disorder. The WHO does.
Yeah, and we could go down a rabbit hole in that. But I was curious that here in Canada, you don't have the frequency or magnitude of acts of violence per se, but do you feel the industry faces the same level of scrutiny that we have in the United States as far as the social repercussions of the games that we create?
I don't think we have. Over the last year, I think we've had some more negative media than we've ever had. I've been in this job a little over 6 years, and I can say that I was very new to the job when Sandy Hook happened, and I was spending my week before Christmas in the office just waiting for the phone to ring, and it never rang. Though my counterpart at the ESA in the United States basically didn't have a Christmas because they were dealing with the fallout from Fox News and the NRA. But over the last year, there's certainly been more focus on video games with respect to being a cause of violence in Canada. I mean, one that I can think of would be the Fredericton shooting back in August. Some of the more in New Brunswick, some of the more incendiary headlines had to do with the fact that the individual was a loner who was addicted to first-person shooter video games. That made the headlines within about 15 hours of the shooting. At the end of the day, it turned out that in fact I don't think he even had a console in his house. So I mean, it really did become that was very I guess what the U.S. would have. But I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the Washington Post overview about video game consumption per capita in like 10 different countries. Canada actually buys and sells more video games per capita than the U.S. does, and we have virtually no gun crime. So do Germany and the UK and France and a number of other countries, yet the United States way up here when it comes to gun crime and sells less video games per capita than any other
We have to be
country.
the best at something.
Yeah, well. So no, I'm saying, so just to answer your question straight, is that we have not had to deal with that narrative here. And I can say that I've done 3 government committees in the last month, and we certainly had some concerns about prepping for potential questions around that. It was never asked. Most of what has been happening is incendiary media headlines, conflating with, I think, in my own opinion, license that's been given to them from the WHO and others who are now legitimizing these types of incendiary headlines by classifying it as they have, right? Because prior to the WHO classification, we weren't seeing any of those types of headlines.
Yeah, the American Psychiatric Association also has a classification for it, but it says
More study
a
required.
condition for further study,
Correct.
whereas the WHO just kind of went like
Correct.
straight to
Yeah.
the end. We're like, yeah, it's a thing.
We're trying to talk some sense into them, but
Yeah, good luck with that.
yeah.
The other question, I guess, since I have the mic real quick, is we see the classification for really high penetration for mobile games, and it's largely due to the fact that mobile devices are incentivized by the service providers. So you can get a phone for free. You don't get a console for free, or a PC for free, or a tablet for free. So it's part of the reason that we've seen such a massive growth in mobile games. But I'm curious if we feel like that growth is ultimately sustainable, and if the industry is actually building itself in a way that will be sustainable. We're seeing this now with microtransactions, where because we didn't self-regulate the way we do with ratings, we didn't set any best practices like developers in Japan have, and now we've sort of created this circumstance where we're a little too liberal and a little too aggressive with things, and now we're going to pay the consequence of that. Does the ESA have any intention of providing recommendations or best practices to the industry?
Okay, so first of all, with respect to the first question, which is it this a subscription model, kind of the phone? I think that the video game industry is looking at moving in more of that direction. I mean, with Xbox All Access, where you can get the console and pay a monthly subscription fee and have access to about 100 games, and now you're seeing some of the streaming services that are being tested and announced. I think you're seeing more move in that direction. I mean, who knows? Maybe someday you don't even need a piece of hardware to play. You can play on whatever you want. I think that's a lot of what's been made public has been kind of moving in that direction. The second question that you had was with respect to kind of like self-regulation. So with respect to mobile games, the industry has had a mobile game rating system now for about 3 years with IARC, which is the International Age Rating Coalition, which was a coalition amongst most of the international rating community, like PEGI and ESRB and USK. They all came together and they built a mobile rating service. The problem is that not all the mobile platforms have put it on it, but Google Play has it, and most of our member companies are either instituting it or planning to in the near future.
Yeah, I wasn't really so concerned about the content of the games because I feel like the global industry has it on lock with various rating bodies, but it's more about self-regulating best practices as it comes to business decisions, monetization strategies, because we've been irresponsible as an industry, and now we're seeing with Belgium and the United States, is this gambling? Is this predatory? Do we feel like as an industry we need to set a best practice, or do we think that we're just going to let the governments do it for us?
Well, I don't think we're ever in a position where we let governments do it for us. I mean, that's what people like me exist for. That's what people like associations and all the other countries exist for. I think our industry would never allow governments to just do it for us. That's why we created ESRB and a number of the other rating systems to ensure that we at least own this, and we did it ourselves. And it's worked really well. And in fact, the FTC in the United States have said that, or the FCC has said the ESRB rating system's way better than the MPAA, and it's much more well known. And in Canada, we do things like sending secret shoppers into stores to make sure they can't buy them games and things like that. So so we're very responsible when it comes to that. With respect to monetization strategies, I mean, I'll just leave it to individual companies with that. I mean, people can innovate and find ways to make the game more engaging for the individual players that want to be there. I mean, quite frankly, if players have an issue with a monetization strategy, they just won't use it. I'm not really sure it's a role for the government to play in terms of regulating it. But with respect to, like I mentioned, and I know where you're going with this, with loot boxes and random generators, I made a really good comment to somebody the other day about these LOL dolls that my daughter brings home, and they're all over Toys R Us. You want to go to Toys R Us and Walmart, and I had to kind of give my head a shake when she's bringing this back, saying it's all the rage, and it's essentially a wrapped toy. It's called an LOL surprise, and all the kids want it. It's a physical. It's not digital. It's physical. And you open it up and you have no idea what doll you're going to get, but you get a map and it says, collect them all and trade them. And I mean, it's the same thing, and you don't see anybody talking about LOL dolls or any type of random toy that you may be able to get. And these things are all the rage at Christmas. So with respect to Belgium and other countries that have looked at this, I mean, I'm not going to speak for them. Obviously, we disagree with that. And I really just don't see how a government can look at loot boxes and say that they are gambling when you don't look at these toys and say the same thing, right? I mean, it is very odd.
Have a question about. Well, first, thank you for the talk.
No, thank you for coming.
I was wondering, do you have any data on how much money Canadians are willing to spend in a year on gaming?
Newzoo, I think, has. I think we're the 8th largest market in the world with respect to gaming revenues, and I'm trying to think. It was like $2.3 billion, I believe, off the top of my head. So we actually, it was one of the data points that I was going to use when I went to committee, but I didn't want to conflate two really confusing data point, so I left it. But we generate close to $4 billion in GDP with respect to the production of video games in this country, but we only sell about 2.3 million or 2.3 billion worth of products. So we're actually like a net exporter of games versus a net a creator. So it's definitely lower than what it is with the creation, but I do believe it's around 2.3 billion in sales. And I also think that includes hardware. Yeah. Anyway, Newzoo's got a great website. They've got all the revenue, but we are the 8th largest video game market in the world. I can say that.
Hi.
Hello.
I was wondering if you had any data about how Canadians are breaking down their dollars, their entertainment dollars. What split goes towards video games versus other media?
That I don't know. We didn't ask that question. What we do know is that video game players are getting entertained through Netflix and TV and movies and all sorts of other ways. We do know that. With respect to how much they're spending or which percentage of their disposable income goes towards video gaming, I don't have that. It wasn't part of the overall study, but it would be an interesting data point to know. Sorry.
Hi.
Hi.
Is there any way in the data that was shown where Canadian gamers are outliers or just unique compared to the global market?
We have more of them per capita than anyone else in the world. That might count. It's tough to say because it's there's not a lot of other organizations that have done this type of research. So I mean, in fact, we've put this out to all the other global associations that we work with to say, look, this is some best practice that we think is really valuable to change the narrative around games and really show what the Canadian gamer is. And in fact, I really think that you should be doing this in the U.S. The U.S. does it, but not they haven't structured it the exact same way. But the Australians, the Brits, they're not doing it in the same way as this. And so I don't have really anything solid to compare it to, but if I did, it would be really interesting as well to find out if there was anything different. I mean, I can go between Canada and then I can break it down into Quebec, which we already did for a media interview, and I can say that, English Canada and French Canada, those two sets of gamers, if I was to break it down like that, are virtually the same. So I'll take that and wonder that perhaps a British gamer or an American gamer is not so different than a Canadian gamer. It's just a guess.
Hi.
Hi.
And
Again.
not to be controversial, but I always thought that the Japanese had more players per people.
Well, they have more people than we do. They have a lot more players, but per capita, we have more than anyone
Per
else.
capita,
Yeah.
even per capita.
Yeah, even per capita.
Oh, wow, that's news for me.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Even per capita.
Okay.
We've got about, I don't know, how 5 more minutes, so if there's any more questions, I got time for 1 or 2, and otherwise we can wrap up, and I'll be around, and you can ask me questions on the side if you want. I think we're the last session here, so I think this is done after me, so I don't have to run away. But if there's anything else that anyone wants to ask that... Oh, no questions for you. So.
An easy one. No, I didn't really had a question in mind. I just wanted to thank you because I think every year you come with a new study that helps us to know what our community is all about much better. And the rest of the year, Alliance Numérique or even other associations that I can see here, it gives us so much material, so many tools to represent the industry much better when we do have some lobby to do, either through the government, the banks, or even just media talks. So thank you very much. What you do is important, and I like the fact that year after year you come to MIGS, and there's always new people sitting in the room and listening about your studies and knowing more about your work. So thank you very much, Jason.
Oh, thank you for letting us be here. Yeah, and thank you to all of you for coming because, we want the message to get out, and we want people to know about it. So it's certainly not a secret. And again, you can find all this information on our website for free. You're free to use it, just attribute it to us. But beyond that, I mean, it's not behind a paywall or anything like that. So you're able to get it and use it. And in the meantime, if anyone has any other questions for me, you can contact us on our website or follow our Twitter. We're posting all sorts of really interesting infographics all the time and animated GIFs on Twitter that you may find interesting. Some of them are in our slide deck, but not all of them. So anyway, thanks again.